Great. Thanks a lot, everyone. It's great to be here. I know it's a developer conference, so I've actually got our lead developers here, so I'll try and answer as many questions as possible, but you can chase us up afterwards for some of the more technical things. As you may or may not know, Isobar, or Visual Jazz Isobar, recently launched 10Play, and so when I was asked to come in here and present about the future of TV, which is something I've been working on for some time, I thought it'd be a great opportunity to run through the crowd a little bit about how we created 10Play, not just from a development perspective, but all the challenges that Network 10 faced, and sharing as much as feasibly possible here today. So really that's the story today. It's the story of 10Play and how we reinvented how they considered TV, primarily by starting with the browser rather than reinventing their broadcast. It's not without challenges. Before we get started, if there's anything you want to say, obviously Rod Farmer on Twitter, but it'll be great to catch up with people through questions there afterwards. So this is 10Play. So 10Play is an actual ecosystem. It's not just a browser experience. So there's an iOS app, the Android app's coming out, and it's obviously a fully responsive web build. And it's got lots of complexities under the hood there about how we aggregate and syndicate content, but also how we maintain continuance between those platforms. So these continuous experiences I've been talking about for years, or connected experiences people are sort of talking about today. So the ability to start and stop on one device or in one channel, move on and pick up exactly where you were before. So 10Play enables you to watch a video, put down the device, pick up a foreign device, come back and continue playing exactly where you left off. With all the data and analytics and smart data we continually talk about happening under the hood, which is building us some really great profiles about how people are consuming TV. So yeah, I work at Visual Jazz Isobar. It's a really crap name, Visual Jazz, but it's great work. Have a lot of fun here. And I've been with Visual Jazz for about 12 months after I sold my company. As of today, and so I apologize for all the slides, we've now rebranded to Isobar Global. So we're Isobar Australia. And this is where I'm the Executive Director of Experience Design. So I look at pulling together all of strategy, design, and technology to make sure that what we deliver is desirable, feasible, and viable. I kind of look after the Melbourne, Sydney, and Canberra offices, but I try and spend as much time up here because this is the view I get rather than a parking lot. And Isobar's 35 offices around the world. We're pretty big, 4,500 people. We've recently also been bought out by the Dentsu network as part of the Dentsu Aegis kind of acquisition, which makes us actually part of the largest media organisation in the world. And that brings some new challenges, but some wonderful opportunities as well. Just because it's a local crowd, if you're not kind of familiar with who we are, we're about 220 people strong, makes us the largest end-to-end digital agency in Australia, with a very strong development component of around about 70 people across all of our offices. It's something we pride ourselves on, really the calibre of our engineering capability. We just don't do platform and product work, which is what I'm going to talk to you today. Obviously, we do the campaign work, and we do a lot of those sort of social activations as well, so full service. But more than anything else, what I kind of have as my mantra is the most important thing we need to do when designing these experiences, make the right thing, and then make the thing right. I think we get caught up a little bit in design about rushing towards the UI, about making the thing the right way. And it doesn't really matter if you make the best possible designs or the best possible platform engineered the right way if it doesn't actually fit the business needs or the consumer needs. So we always try and take our companies all the way back to that initial start of what's the right thing to build for you, and then we try and build it the right way. And that's really the story of 10Play, as you'll see here today. I don't want to talk about the app here today. That's a very different presentation. But I do want to talk about how we went about through the browser experience. And this was really, for me, probably my dream gig. Basically, when we got asked to reconsider TV as a whole, not just broadcast linear TV, but what the hell is TV? So it meant I got to spend a hell of a lot of time watching YouTube. And the audio's not working, so I'm going to skip over that. I'm going to skip over the next one. Let's go to the next one. Oh, there we go. Let's go for that one. So I absolutely love that kid. It got more views than any views of Homeland combined across any device. It got more shares than any broadcast TV sharing of any content across any social network. The power of these videos that you're starting to find on YouTube and other social platforms is immeasurable, and you simply can't ignore it. And it leads us to a question that we really need to take at first hand, which is we need to reconsider what is TV. And if you take a moment just to think about your own perceptions of what is TV, you might come up with things such as it might be about physicality, it might be about context, it might be the content medium, it might be about how it's transmitted. But it's really not a simple thing to try and solve. Yet another sort of thing.
Pues igual que yo. ¿Y qué opina usted? ¿Qué opina usted? ¿Qué opina usted del gobierno canario? ¿Y de los ayuntamientos de la isla?
So user-generated content at its best on YouTube. It's fantastic. So you consider that and you sort of say, is user-generated content TV? Well, you've got to ask yourself the following question of, really, how different is that experience from, say, watching Funniest Home Videos back in the 80s and 90s? I don't know if it goes on after that. So the question is, perhaps it was TV when it was with broadcast because it had a set-top box, so it had some sort of physical component. So perhaps it's about the box. So we consider this. We consider broadcast TV with an aggregation of social content. This is RooTube, which is a broadcast linear TV show, which just aggregates all the YouTube shows. But how different is that to all the aggregated, curated playlists, non-celebrity things you can already find on YouTube anywhere? So all of a sudden, the hardware and the software starts to go out the window as how you start to define TV, which really starts to raise the question of, really, where does TV live? And it might seem to you to be a bit of a moot point and not terribly important, but for every single broadcast TV provider in the world, it's probably the #1 challenge. Viewer engagement, and how do we address people going to non-broadcast linear TV forms? So people have been saying for a while now that TV is dead. TV is not dead. A little stat for you right now is that broadcast TV is absolutely on the decline. There's no doubt about that. But the actual viewing of TV shows, not just user-generated content, but TV shows, is rapidly on the increase. More people are watching TV shows on more devices more often than any other time in history. But broadcast TV is going down. So TV is not dead. TV is very much alive and well, but we need to shift our focus on how we deliver TV. And that's really the big question. And it's something that's been kind of being mulled around for about the last 40 years. What's the role of TV and what is it? So here's a definition from the 60s. Television is not one of the arts, but a mere transmitter of them. So the 60s, we saw TV as an actual transmitter, something physical. By the 80s, we were saying television is not a thing in itself, but it's merely a means of transmission for other processes of significance. So it's not the transmitter. TV is about how it's transmitted. So it's transmission medium. Sounds a bit more like hardware to software sort of stuff. And we get today, which is the BBC World Conference on what is TV. TV, this certain type of vision, or televisuality, might be a kind of common denominator amongst the countless kinds of screens we use today. So in other words, we're starting to say that TV has got nothing to do with a set-top box. It's not really about how it's transmitted. It's just about vision on any device at any time. And really, this is the sort of things we've been watching over the last 20 years of shifting from old kind of set-top boxes towards modern set-top boxes, hardware integration, and now we start moving towards the future of TV where it's vision on any device at any point in time. And I think we all get that. The challenge with just saying that is that we still don't understand what customers and consumers are really doing. And this stat will come up a bit later on, but we can have a look at the behavioural changes that we all know about when we're trying to watch TV and on the mobile phone or on a tablet. And everyone says complementary content during a show is absolutely critical. Well, it's not. The actual fact is, with complementary content, as most people search for complementary content about a show before the show starts or after the show finishes. During the show, they actually have very minimal micro interactions, but they don't search for a lot of complementary content. Sports being the big differentiator, that is a very different experience, so we'll hive off sport. Because of these changing in behaviours, we need to actually change how we design for all of these experiences. And each one of these, I'll let you think about it yourself if you're familiar with them, actually get you to interact with the product in a very different way, but they're all assuming this is how you consume TV content. And it absolutely influences the sort of content that you view. And I've spent the last 2 weeks over in the Bay Area and spent a bit of time with Google. And without being able to share anything, really the roadmap for how people start to consume vision, and obviously there's a Google Glass vision aspect you'll understand, but really different types of vision, how that integrates with a TV possible experience, is that sort of roadmap really talks to the changing nature of the types of devices we're going to be using to interact with TV and what that means for how we consume TV. So, with all of that in mind, we're definitely on a fairly big ride. Hardware, software, content formats, licensing, it's going to be an absolute nightmare. But the thing for me that's really probably the most exciting thing is, really the browser. The browser's been the most exciting thing for me for a number of years. It's supposed to be the most open and portable solution we've got for consuming content. And yes, we can understand all the challenges with designing for an iPhone or a smartphone, how we design responsively. We heard some great stuff from David around the challenges, particularly around content and format, around designing for responsive solutions. But still not a lot of our responsive designs tail up to any scale of device, 30-inch, 60-inch, 100-inch devices. And that's one of the challenges we had with 10 Play. How do we scale responsively to a very large environment? And conversely, the next problem we're looking at is how do we actually scale down to very small environments for consuming content. And I think by focusing on the browser, it's going to provide us the biggest challenges, but also the biggest opportunities to really break our molds of how we've designed content in the past, to being a little bit more device agnostic, bit of a buzzword. Coming back to Tim Berners-Lee, kind of one of his more recent posts, and I've summarized here. So HTML will help achieve device interoperability, domain agnosticism, and an open and standard media type. So in other words, it's not supposed to be really tied to any device or a specific metaphor of how we interact with content. Then we kind of went, fucked it, right? We got IE8, we've designed for print metaphors, which we heard with David, but we had desktop metaphors. We put everything into very fixed, structured layouts. We assumed the content was to only be interacted with very certain types of input devices. And we really have kind of set us back a fair way. And we have to do better. We can't keep banging our heads against the table. And everyone's working on this at the moment, and it's fantastic. Primarily read by mobile first. Now, if I think about mobile first, I just want to give some examples. I want to question for us, can we even think about designing for mobile anymore? Right? So this is a mobile device, and you're out and about. You've got some contextual awareness, hopefully. But this is the same mobile device, but now I'm sitting down and I'm sedentary and I'm sharing that experience with somebody else. Different behavior. I'm on my couch, I'm sitting down, I might be watching YouTube and that, that kid shooting the basketball. Again, a different type of experience. Is that a mobile experience? Am I designing in a different way for that? Perhaps you consider a mobile device as a small smartphone and you're on the tram or on a bus and that's a total mobile experience. But if I take that same smartphone and I sit on the couch, again, with durations of anywhere between 15 and 20 minutes, depending on the type of media you're trying to consume, is that a mobile experience? And if sitting on a couch, regardless of device size, is a mobile experience, isn't a laptop sitting down on the couch for a couple of hours, is that a mobile experience? Perhaps it is about the size and it's got to be pocketable. Not sure about that. Perhaps it's also got to make a phone call and be small. Not sure about that, right? Fact of the matter is, and I think you all know this as developers, there's just so many goddamn sizes out there in devices, particularly around the Android ecosystem. 250 different sizes of Android devices in the US on sale today. It's basically impossible to talk about mobile being fixed to a physicality or a device resolution. And I'm stealing these slides from Luke Robolski. He's got a great presentation that he's got up on his Data Monday website. But this is how we used to think about things. We used to think about things in very fixed sizes. We even had this to quite recently with smartphones and tablets. Then we came along with phablets, and we started to break things. Our tablets got slightly bigger than laptops. Our laptops got smaller than phablets. It's going all around the shop. And basically, when you start looking at all these different devices around the market that we're interacting with, they span so many different device sizes that you really can't break a responsive design based down into very fixed breakpoints where you assume, I'm designing for mobile, I'm designing for a tablet mini, I'm designing for a tablet, now a desktop, Now I'm designing for a TV. It just doesn't work that way. There's too much variability in the devices. And it really shouldn't be about the device. It should be about the content and how we adapt that content fairly much in a flexible way without a 3 or a 6 breakpoint structure. And if you don't believe me in terms of how devices are changing and how ridiculous it's going to get, have a look at this thing.
Time waits for no one else but you. No one else but you. No one else but you. No one. Yeah. Yesterday's dreams, they all turn a funny shade of blue. No one else but you. But in the cold of the night, when you're underneath your lights, but don't you let your demons drag you down.
So the kids are playing, mum gets a phone call on her phone, picks it up. Anyway, it goes on a little bit. I think you get the point. Watch out for your kids stealing your smartphone. They're going to be taken off with your desk soon, right? So fantastic, lots of different types of experiences. I don't want to berate the device. It's got some interesting aspects, but you can see what is mobile, what's not, is a phone call. I mean, you really can't limit it down to a very clear description of it being small. So that's some of the challenges in terms of why we need to think differently about TV. It's some of the challenges about why we need to think differently about how we deliver content for a TV experience across different devices. But also wanted to give you guys some stats. I'm not big on throwing out stats, but TV might be a new domain for many of you, so just really, really quickly. The landscape in TV is just ludicrous. It's a lot of people running around like a bunch of maniacs, and it makes it very hard to understand. So this is the current, and you might not be able to see this clearly. Oh, it's come up pretty well. So in terms of when we talk about TV in the States right now, all funded, all working with broadcast networks, we've got social EPGs, generic social networks, TV social networks, social-enabled devices, remote, check-in, discussions, rewards, gamification, social TV analytics, metadata suppliers, content detection making, general social analytics, social curation and syndication, ad-serving platforms, ad production, sharing, technology, and oh my God, right? There's a hell of a lot of players out there in the market. And then you've got another type of way in which they're all fragmented up again. Some of the offerings where they all come together talk about content companions. Some of them talk about smart TV and first screen complementary interaction. So it's your primary screen, but it's got additional content interaction. And then you've got the broadcast and internet TV, which is really where 10play fits, delivering digitally a broadcast experience whilst trying to evolve. And you take all of that together and you look at all those players, and it really gets distilled down into these simple emerging trends, the difference between linear broadcast TV and the digital highway. Ooh, that sounded really 80s. Digital highway, digital roadmap for TV. And that's when we start looking at the future of TV around video consumption, just about everything boils down to how can I participate more, how can I have better conversations, two-way conversations, how can I engage in the way that I want to engage, and how can I shift from one device to another, all of which breaks broadcast TV immediately. And it's traditionally what they're very, very bad at. So asking someone like Network 10 to take that step into that environment was a very long road and a very tough challenge. And this is kind of where we came up to when they first asked us to look at 10play, well, relook at TV. Have a look on the left-hand side. Can we have all of these companion experiences? And on the right-hand side, can we have all of these place-shifted experiences, so shifting with mobile and having it follow me around? And if we can just combine it into the middle and can we have a TV experience that's socially integrated, has offline viewing, complementary content and backstories, catch up, commenting and gamification, searching. I want to chat with moderators. I'd love to have some badges along the way, an EPG. I'd like to be able to track TV usage and have a personalized experience and recommendation engines, and that's fine. And we got given 6 months. So, very, very quickly, is it worth doing? Well, yes, in terms of digital, 200% increase in the number of people with connected devices watching TV in Australia today. As I said before, that whole complementary thing, we really need to look at that behaviour a little bit more. What's the primary way of finding TV content? It's not searching for Channel 10, it's not searching for Channel 1, Channel 11, it's searching for a TV show. This has a fundamental impact about how you do information hierarchy and information architectures for channels or businesses that typically say, we have to promote Channel 1 and Channel 11 and Channel 10, because that's where our ad funding comes from, and that's how we do TVCs. But people don't search for content that way. It has dramatic ramifications for what digital looks like. And the digital frontage is a reflection of your business. So it automatically puts the business into conflict with an evolving digital landscape. TV viewing, 75% of Australians streamed video content online, and that grew by 93%. What's the last one? Hours watched grew by 91% in 2012. Advertising, you don't think it's really important? Well, advertising for mobile viewing, and an advertising count is somebody actually watched the damn thing. You didn't skip it after 5 seconds, you watched the damn thing. 220% growth in consumer viewing of mobile video advertising in 2012, right? And we watched almost all of that mobile video, or 60%, so the greater majority, via the mobile web. We didn't watch it via an app, we watched it via mobile web. So the browser again. 400 million social mobile video views last year in Australia, predominantly most of those 75% via YouTube, right? And the references back to TV viewing through a browser or through an app, 500% increase from social. Right? Again, none of this is really a broadcast TV land, but does talk to the importance of how people are engaging with TV differently. They're searching. And that's another thing. The best way, or the most common way that people switch between devices so they can say, how do I stop viewing in one platform and start viewing on another device, is they use search. They use Google search. Predominantly, that's the way where they can device shift and place shift with their devices. I'll skip over the next stats. Right, so that's a hell of a lot to take in, right? And the deck will be coming out, obviously. Video is very, very important. It's totally shaping the way we consume TV in Australia, and almost none of the broadcasters are geared up ready to do it. What are some of the problems that they're facing? And let's go through the things that we couldn't fix that you'll see later on. Large content libraries. Well, that's a programming issue for broadcast. They're not used to getting a hell of a lot of content for broadcast and keeping it and distributing it. So there's a dearth of content. Fresh new content. Well, you know this. If you've gone to the 10-play environment, if you have, I think it works really, really well, but there's only so much content you can access. Popular shows. Well, that's programming again. That's purchasing. That's got nothing to do with digital. Right? All of these sorts of issues are hygiene factors. Right, that you have to get right. It doesn't really matter what you design in the end. People after a period of time are going to walk away. Right. So now let's go through the case study of really how we did 10-play. So when we walked in, I like this image. When we walked in, they kind of said, can you help us really look at our TV offering? And 10 are an amazing client, great people, and they really did have to look at their entire business in a new way, which was really, really supportive. But they basically presented us with some existing designs, which is kind of like a spoon, and then asked us to create something from the future. That is how hard it was for them under the hood. So when we walked in, we got a whole bunch of work in progress that they'd been working on for about 18 months, and we were initially asked just to kind of colour in the boxes and do great, amazing, creative designs on top of that. But this is what we got, and I'll walk you through this. So what we've got here is we've got some carousels at the top, we've got some custom MRECs, we've got the arrow on the left-hand side shows that a part of the screen is also swiping to the left. Underneath that, I've also got some rows which swipe to the left as a carousel. And down the bottom, I've got 2 rows that are separated, so 2 columns, and both of those can swipe in a carousel. All within a mobile browser. And any of you guys who have designed for touch will absolutely know about dead zones, which is the device has absolutely no idea half the time about where the touch interaction is coming from and where the focus is vis-a-vis going up and down and left and right. So this is absolutely dead in the water. There were massive modal overlays and popovers, so this was the design for if you wanted to actually find a show. You click on a button and the entire thing would go down about 3 folds worth of just a massive overlay. Again, none of this was going to be working on a tablet. The smartphone designs, and I've got to say, I really have to commend them for all the work that they did. It's just very, very difficult to execute. So what we've got here is a mobile web experience where we've actually got menus that fly out to the right that are polling dynamic content, social information, updates, recommendations. So that's constantly polling to Ajax queries in the background. And on the left-hand side, we have another fly-out menu. Again, all through the browser, all exceptionally difficult to do, but also makes it very, very slow, very heavyweight. We were also told that in order to do this, we had to go down sort of like a content once published everywhere framework. And primarily that was very, very difficult because all of their content for Network 10 are stored in very different repositories. Their video comes from one area, their content for shows comes from another. You've got third-party content going into multiple services. It's really all over the place. We needed to find an architecture that could bring it all back together. It's very, very easy when faced with those sort of problems, and we fell into it, as I'll call out in a second, to start thinking about responsive design and start thinking about UI. But as you probably heard here today, none of that really solves the fundamental problems for Network 10 of going digital. It's just solving the fundamental problem of how do I design the UI. And if you go down that path, and this is what happened to us, we got kind of sucked into this for a little while, before we'd even worked out how we're going to deliver this and how we're going to basically pull all these sources together so it even hangs together, we got caught in a debate about whether using a 980 or 960 grid. And that was driven by irregular sizes of MRECs versus standard IAB MRECs of 300 pixels versus 340 pixels that were coming in and what that would do for our grid structure. So calling us out, rather than kind of living what I've been talking about, which is going back to first principles, we caved in. And we actually went through and did all of the designs to show them what a future version of 10 Play would look like. We included versions, I'll go back one, we included versions that didn't have any advertising, and that was really helpful for 10 to kind of see the different types of experiences that can be had when they start to think about advertising in a different way. We did versions with takeovers and gutters, and that's because a lot of the revenue that comes from TV is actually major sponsorships of shows and channels. So when you're ad funded, it's really, really risky just to say, damn those ads, because without the ads, everything disappears. We went around and we looked at all the other services around the world and how they designed for TV through the browser. And if you have a look at all of these, they've all got the same problem. I'll go back. It's a set 960 grid structure that doesn't scale, won't go up to TV, and uses a hell of a lot of empty space, with one or two exceptions. The major one, obviously, being HBO. Right? And what HBO is renowned for is it's the quality of their content and their curation of content. And that's what Network 10 wanted to stand for. But there's a very big difference between how HBO is remunerated and Network 10 is remunerated from advertising. Right? So we managed to get rid of most of the gutters. The other thing we've started working on, which we're terribly excited about, and we're doing a little bit of work with Google on, is actually doing fully responsive advertising units. Not in a way where we create advertising units bespoke, but how we actually create it once and distribute it across multiple different devices, which is very, very important for responsive designs, because without flexible ad units and responsive ad units that change not just size but their nature, your responsive designs always come a cropper. So it's fine if you're designing without advertising funding. Challenges won't exist, but when you have to design with ads, this is a very, very big problem. All right. So after we did all of that and we got buy-in, we still had issues of how we're actually going to do the video playing. We had DRM issues, we had lack of content, we had lack of fresh programming content. Everything's coming out in torrents a lot sooner than us. How do we do the adaptive mobile? Is it adaptive? Is it responsive? And then we had issues such as the images. The images were broadcast and then they weren't scaled down properly. And a lot of the images that had been previously done for digital were just keyframes within a video stream. So there's no mastheads, there was no proper logos for digital. It was very, very difficult. Right, so they got a little bit lost along the way. And I want to share how we solved in change. And again, I'm talking primarily to the developers in here because this is probably something that you're not going to appreciate as much, but this is how we managed to get to a great responsive outcome and a great engineering outcome by going through the business in a different way. So with all of those things, such as people searching for shows, not for channels, we challenged the business on what it really meant to be channel 1, channel 10, channel 11, and really is that what the business is about? Or is it just about TV and all those other things are subservient? That led to a challenge of what is your brand? What does Network 10 stand for? And do we go out there with Channel 1, Channel 10, Channel 11? Or do we hide it? So we went all the way back out through branding exercises, and I'll go through this really quickly. Well, we spend weeks asking the business across all levels to the CEO, asking them to tell us what they wanted to move away from and what they were absolutely going to commit towards moving towards. We got them to tell us everything that had hurt them as a business and all the things that were stopping them from competing in the marketplace. We asked them to actually say, what are the things that we can hold you accountable for and the things that we can guarantee are going to be delivered to us in terms of content, freshness, TV, programming. And we got the whole business to turn around and say we need to be authentic. We can't just say it's a personal TV experience, because a personal TV experience has to be truly about my experience. It has to be about what I want. So if you can't meet that promise, you can't go out saying it's a personal experience. But we can go out saying it's an authentic experience. Everything that we did had to be discoverable through SEO, through platform search, through tagging, ZBox integration. Everything had to be discoverable. And more than anything else, the whole premise of 10 Play had to be about entertainment. It wasn't going to be about a brand new world. It just had to be about entertaining Australians through great quality content. So we went through a big, single-minded proposition branding exercise. We got tens and tens and tens of people through to actually have a look at naming conventions and what they thought of Network 10. We did lots of co-design exercises if you're a user experience person in here. We did collaborative design, participatory sketching, really try and understand what it meant to engage with TV in Australia and 10. And in the end, we put together a brand new brand architecture, which was digitally led, which was adopted by the business that says, this is what Network 10 is going to be. And we need to be this because of digital. And this is the power of the creative. I'm an old engineer myself, and I tend to lean that way. But this was quite an amazing thing that really got the CEO excited. We got them to paint this future vision. So I can't do the copy as well as our creative director, but basically it's like, imagine a place where entertainment collides, where comedy meets current affairs and action meets drama, where sports becomes reality and your old favourites become new discoveries, where childhood heroes are introduced to a new generation, and where things have colours of every emotion, where your experience is wholly unique to you and your opinion matters, and where you're always just in time to catch your favourite shows. This is a place where you come and play. It's a place where you come and play. It's 10 Play. And we've since changed and evolved that brand territory and those taglines. But then seeing how that works with broadcast, with TVCs, seeing where the call to actions are to drive it to digital and how integrated it is. Integrating during rolling credits to introduce somebody that is now going to be available for catch-up, or there's now the moderated conversation that's happening at the end. And how it's all going to work from an SEO, SEM perspective as well for discoverability. And then ultimately, what is this destination that people are going to come to? And how does this stand out against the competitors? And it really does. This is what gets a C-suite engaged. That really opens the doors so you can start pushing different ways of designing and different ways of doing development. And 10 were absolutely closed to doing responsive design. And it was these sorts of brand and creative exercises that really got them excited and opened up the possibilities for them to say, make it happen. This is what we want. This is what we want to stand for. And it was a massive, massive turnaround. So once we had that, we went through a whole bunch of user research, doing a whole bunch of qualitative insights around what makes people tick around watching TV, particularly around 10. Went out to people's homes, we watched them watch TV, we watched how they watch TV with different devices, looked at their patterns of movement. We did a lot of that through things like cultural probes and diary studies. These are techniques where you can actually give people packs and you can track what they're doing over a week or 2 weeks, where they're watching, how they're watching, who they're talking to, how they're sharing. And you can bring them back after 2 weeks and you've literally got a snapshot of their life over the last 2 weeks. It's an extremely effective way of getting into someone's skin, because you bring them into the lab, there's something called prestige bias, which is they're going to want to tell you what you want to hear because they think you're someone important. Or, because it's in a fake environment, it's called the Hawthorne bias, which is because you got them in a lab rather than at their living room, you actually get completely different results. So to understand what people were doing, we actually had to track them in their homes. right? And we did lots of competitor analysis. We came back and we played out to them the 1 foot, 2 foot, and 10 foot experience about what the features and functionalities were and what they needed to commit to. And we put together very simple one-pages of how the whole 10-play ecosystem would work, including integration with things like ZBox and third-party vendors, opportunities for the experience, how people are going to interact with 10-play in different ways, but also the opportunities to monetize, because that needed to be funded. We did all the great things that hopefully a lot of you do. We brought it all into big war rooms. We did affinity diagram. We had post-it notes everywhere, and we clustered them together about what different types of users were saying and how that would translate into features. And then we went out from a technical perspective, and we saw which ones were actually capable and which ones could we fund. And that gave us the ability to kind of funnel down all the wish lists we'd heard to an actual roadmap of what we could deliver. Not just did we do sketching with customers, we actually had sketching sessions with the chief design officer. We put things up on the wall. We got them really engaged. We initially brought Channel 10, Network 10 into our offices, and we got them to embed in our culture and work with us for 3 weeks. We then picked them up after that, after they came kind of used to our culture, and we embedded our entire team at Network 10 back out on a separate floor at Network 10. And we let that culture kind of flourish, and more people came into it and picked up this new culture of how to design. And we built multiple war rooms, right? Visions all around the place. And that's where the conversations had. And that's where the CEO and the CDO came down to have the conversations against the designs with the developers, with the creatives as we're going through it. So I'm going to show you what we ended up with and very quickly go through some of the challenges as we look through the visuals and then do a bit of a summary slide. So this is the homepage. So as you can see, we won the battle, ultimately, a great battle to have about advertising on the homepage. This is the first landing page. It's the most critical thing, but I can tell you from a funding perspective, this hurts, right? So for any network provider to make this call of minimizing advertising, big leaderboards or gutters or fireplace takeovers, it's significant. So this is a really good outcome. You can see down the bottom there that we've got things like TV guide toolbars that follow you around the site that you can pop up and pop down. We've got all the things like playlists and episodes that follow you across devices. You can track shows. Soon you'll be able to share all of those listings. A bit of a roadmap there. You can see from the IA perspective that from the top level, channels are gone. Channel for the business are gone, which again is a massive kind of 180 for the business. And we're really making very simple navigation and the ability to find shows. And you would have, hopefully you recall that other slide I had up with the initial design was a big modal popover with about 50 shows going down a couple of folds. It wasn't just a simple navigation responsive design either, because the other thing we need to do is we need to handle sometimes 3-4 levels of navigation. So here's the sporting page. This is where we've got different sorts of ad unit fundings for things like sports and news, which we don't want, which actually doesn't have that much big of an impact when you kind of lay it over the top of a really quality show like Homeland. All the social interaction that you'd expect is now in there. All right. You can see here, in terms of just the degradation, I'll just go back. You can see the browsing at the top and the 3 levels of navigation below that. When it gets to the iPad mini, you can see that some of that navigation is still there, but we've simplified the top. When you get down to the mobile, you can see that we've hidden away all of that menu navigation. We've moved that footer trailing TV episode guide from the bottom to a top. Also reduced the amount of content that gets shown, most appropriate for mobile, shows the things that are most important as well in the future of what's being watched the most. And then you can see maybe from the last image there, how we're sort of handling those 3rd and 4th levels of navigation. We built a TV guide. This is very, very tough to build a TV guide because you don't actually have all the access to all the information in one foul swoop. So you've got to make multiple calls and pull it back, and the users are swiping. That content's got to be there before you've actually swiped. So that's actually a really tricky challenge. So we did that. It works on mobile, and it's bloody fast on mobile as well. So making all of those back-end calls, bringing it together, having the content ready before the swipes occurred, as well as the scroll on, was very tough, and really, really proud of what the guys did on that space. In terms of the search goes across all the site. We can do more with search in the future. We can also see the popular searches in there as well. There's a little bit of an SEO trick happening there as well because they're static, is that we can actually have them, makes the site a little bit more discoverable around those major assets. One thing I really don't like about the site myself, because I hate these, are big mega footers. I don't really like them, but again, from an SEO perspective, it makes the site far more discoverable. Particularly, as I mentioned before, that people are searching for these TV shows, not for Channel 1, Channel 10, Channel 11. On the mobile, there's no point, right? You're coming to it yourself. You may be coming from a social interaction, 500% uplift in social conversions through to a TV viewing experience. So you're most likely landing upon here because you've done a search on your mobile or coming through social, but it's highly unlikely that you're coming to the site and you're going to be searching all around the place by mega menus. The big part of 10 Play is obviously the viewing experience, so it's got reminders, and you can track, and you can favorite, and playlist, yada, yada, yada. I'll come up with the challenges around all of this in a second. But again, responsively, we really tailor that entire viewing experience. And this is quite tricky because one of the requirements of Network 10 is when you're watching a video, you're also watching an ad that's synced to the video stream, which is an additional point of video. So there's pre-rolled in the video, but there's a synced IAB ad that goes with it. So how do you handle that when you're actually in a browser? How do you handle that if you've got a playlist that goes from video to video to video, because that's your playlist, so it's continuous play, and you go into full screen, and when you're into full screen, you can't actually detect what that IAB syncing is, right? So there's all these little nuances in doing a responsive design in this way. We didn't win all the battles. Like I said before, you saw sport with the advertising over the top of it, and here you see news, a massive takeover. The only thing I'll say about this is the obvious, is that when you start doing these gutters, it really constrains your ability to be flexible. So the rest of the site will easily go up to a 50-inch TV without a problem. And we handle things like white space between the gutters of images. But when you start constraining a grid like this for gutters, it makes it quite difficult. But one of the nice things that we do is we had some rules in the background that said, if you've got the gutter and you go down to an iPad, that's going to deteriorate the quality so much that we're going to pull out the gutters. So we actually apply gutters on different experiences. And there's no reason to say we shouldn't apply a gutter on a TV, but I think from an advertising perspective, that's probably actually going to be one of the stronger calls for doing it. So here's a quick summary. I've only got a couple of minutes left. Here's a quick summary of all the challenges that you face when you're trying to do responsive TV for linear broadcast. And I'm not talking about Foxtel here. They've got a slightly different domain to linear broadcasters. So first of all, advertising in page. So there's the commercial considerations. How many do you have to show? If you want to change the units, then you've got to go to the ad houses to make sure that they can even produce those sizes. And there's a cost around that as well. We had issues of a range of sizes, internal advertising versus IAB formal formats. We had issues with images scaling in grids, and that's the example I said of. We had a really nice kind of, it wasn't a 3 grid, but we had 3 columns of video content from images perspective. But when that goes out to a very large format, the risk became that some of those gutters between the images started to get very, very wide. So you also have to adapt around that. There's advertising in video. Really big problem that we found with the iPad app when it's launched, which we've now addressed with the help of Brightcove, was that we had pre-roll images. Now, pre-roll images, when you're doing the Brightcove player on an iPad and you do an AirPlay share, it plays without a problem, except the video. When the video stops in a pre-roll after 15 seconds, it kills the AirPlay video stream, and the whole thing kills. So we had lots of customers watching video, and we didn't expect them to be airplaying as much. But they're airplaying, and they were getting all this feedback of saying, the video stops working after 15 seconds whenever I try and watch a video. And it was because of the Brightcove pre-roll ad that hadn't been factored in to that airplay. We have that pre-roll and IAB sync. So if you're doing a video, and on the left-hand side, you're tying contextually the TV show to a TVC ad unit, you've got to be able to do that in sync as you move from one video to the next. And obviously, the big challenge around advertising and video is we're getting content from Brightcove. We're getting content from an ad-serving platform. We're getting content from Sitecore, which had all the episode and naming conventions, and data associated with that. And then we had genre from social. All of these had to be pulled together, and when you look at that design, it needs to be all there. And then it needs to be responsive, and particularly on a mobile, it needs to be fast. So when you're aggregating all these sources of content, it's exceptionally difficult. I mentioned HTML5 DRM, but the other one is server load. When you're looking at video content and you're looking at over 100,000 people hitting this site across multiple devices who have gone from a company that was watching a little bit of digital to people who are now experiencing somewhere between 15 and 45 minutes of digital viewing through the new 10 Play, depending on the platform, depending on the device, you've got massive server load issues, particularly from calling all of those different sources and bringing them together. Oh, man, I can just go on. Licensing and content. Most of the licensing deals for broadcasters don't enable you to broadcast to mobile. Most of them expire after between 7 and 28 days. The image content, all of the images produced for digital for most broadcasters come from a broadcast background, so they're not fit for digital out of the box, and there's lots of big content work done by the content teams. You've got to do sometimes some dynamic transcoding of images and also a bit of sort of CS trickery around the way to make things look a little bit better. And again, the lead developer on this, Robert Tilt, is here today, and he did some amazing work on that front. On the responsive, on the flow of the responsive, we worked with a custom ZERB4 foundation, which gave us really about 6 core, but went up to 12 breakpoints, which meant that we could really go up to any device. So it's not purely without breakpoints, but with 12 breakpoints, we can scale effortlessly across just about any device. And that's really set up 10 for a really good ability to be able to launch new content without having to do too much excessive device testing. And the other thing that it enables us to do is have those consistent media tiles. So you saw in some of the designs all those images. Well, they can now be consistent all the way across 12 different breakpoints. And the last one, which is really the big challenge that you have to deal with, is disparate internal and external teams. Brightcove in Boston, we had a different ad serving provider, we had a back-end team, not ours, that was working on the product. We had the internal 10 team, we had our team on front-end UX and creative and strategy, and we all need to come together to pull it together. There was a massive knowledge gap. 10 had never done responsive before. Very few people in any of the organizations had done a responsive of this level of complexity before. And it really required a lot of education, but also a lot of prototyping and the willingness to fail very, very quickly and experiment with ideas to make this work. And the last one is legal restrictions. So it's not just about DRM, but what content is 10 allowed to show? Why can't they show some certain complementary information, which I'm not going to share, but some stuff they just can't do. You want to find some more behind-the-scenes information, or you want to have some voting, or you want to have some of this or some of that. There's no reason why we couldn't have done it, except for legal restrictions. So again, pulling this all together was more than just thinking about the UI. So I'm done. I could have talked to you a lot about TV innovation with smart apps coming out on Chromecast, the Dial protocol, which now links Google and Samsung and LG all together, that allows you through the browser to stream natively video from a browser to a browser, which is coming out. But really, that's probably taking us a little bit further away from 10 Play. So I think we've gone through quite a bit about how we went through 10 Play. It was a fantastic experience for me and the team. I'm very proud of the work that we did. It was great working with 10, and thank you very much.